Mid-lunch on a summer afternoon in June 1975, the Harper family, Thomas, Evelyn, their teenage son, Jacob, and 8-year-old daughter Lily sat down for roast chicken and lemonade in their farmhouse kitchen outside Maple Hollow, Indiana. A neighbor recalls laughter, a radio song, and then silence. She called for Thomas, and the house answered with a hush. The sentence broke from Mrs. Turner's lips like a small, shocked sound that wanted company. She stood on the Harper kitchen threshold, with sugar in her hand, and the afternoon sunlight cutting the room into 2 squares, one bright, one oddly still. A roast sat half-carved on the table. A glass of lemonade sweated a tiny halo on the wood. 4 plates lay like quiet promises that had been abandoned mid-sentence. For a moment she thought they had stepped outside, that someone had just gone to fetch something and would come back smiling. The back door stood open a crack. The screen door clicked once in the warm wind and then stopped. Mrs. Turner called, "Softer now, Thomas." "Evelyn." Her voice bounced off the linoleum and came back thinner. No chairs scraped. No footsteps answered. It was the clock that made her chest tighten. It read 1:12, the minute hand frozen like a finger caught in the middle of a point. A cheap wall clock, the kind that had been there for years. Its second hand lying limp as if even time had been told to hold its breath. On the counter, near the box of cereal with the paper still folded down, a small cassette recorder hummed with a mechanical whir, low, steady, like a breath that didn't belong to the room. Its red recording dot was dull and unmoving. Mrs. Turner set the sugar down and moved toward the table. She noticed the little things first. Jacob's schoolbook tucked under his elbow, Lily's nickel bracelet on the chair back, the oven mitt left on the stove, as though someone had been distracted at the last moment. The radio on the windowsill gave a little pop. A country song seemed to gape into static, its words collapsing into white noise. She reached for the radio, thumb brushing the dial, and the static snapped off like someone had cut a wire. She found the telephone off the hook, the receiver lying face down on the floor with its cord curling like a question mark. On the kitchen phone, the drywall's voice mail light would have been impossible back then. Messages were spoken into the air and remembered with hands, with notebooks. But something about that receiver felt wrong, abandoned, like a promise left in the rain. Outside, the lane was empty. The driveway still held one set of tire tracks that led to the road and stopped at the mailboxes. No other footprints crisscrossed the yard. It was as if the Harpers had dissolved into sunlight and left their house to hold its breath for them. Mrs. Turner's throat tightened. She called the sheriff. Her voice, when she spoke into the line, sounded small and brittle. "There's no one here," she said. "They were just eating." The sheriff arrived before dusk. He was a man used to small-town troubles and ordinary lies, a badge on his chest that fit him like a habit. He moved through the Harper kitchen with a practiced, cautious step. He looked at the table, at the clock, at the cassette, and then at Mrs. Turner. He asked the expected questions, his voice flat with routine. "Any enemies? Money trouble? Family fights?" He suggested possibilities, like someone testing a theory. "Maybe they ran," he offered, as if disappearance were a sensible, explainable thing. But when the deputy reached out and switched off the cassette, something in the air caught like a held note. He told the deputy to unplug the recorder, to make sure nothing else was playing. The deputy complied, fingers fumbling the cord. The plug came free of the wall, and for a breathless second, the kitchen felt like it might exhale with relief. The hum should have stopped. It did not. The machine's wheel kept turning, a toothless whisper under the varnished table. No red light, no battery ticking, just the soft worry of something still turning when it had no right to. Mr. Harper's watch, left face down on the table, showed the same impossible time as the wall clock, 1:12. The sheriff frowned the way men do when two small mysteries bend around each other and form a shape they cannot name. He looked at Mrs. Turner as if that might help him translate the room outside. Someone from down the lane had already put up a hand-scrawled poster, "Harper family missing." The ink dripped on the paper like the last of a sentence. Mrs. Turner walked back to the table and, without meaning to, lifted the recorder's lid. A thin thread of sound came through. Not a voice, but the faintest hint of a laugh. Like a child at the edge of a memory, cut off as if a hand had brushed the tape down. The sheriff called for backups and for a car to be searched. He wrote down the time he saw on the clock. He wrote down the names. He tried to fit the empty chairs into a story that made sense. But before anyone could find a beginning to put the missing words back into the cassette, kept turning on the kitchen counter, smiling with its own small, steady pulse. "They didn't vanish," Margaret said, her voice shaking in the fluorescent light of the Maple Hollow Sheriff's office. "Families don't just disappear in the middle of lunch." Sheriff Lenz didn't even look up from his paperwork. The sound of his pen scraping against the form filled the room like sandpaper. "Mrs. Cole," he said slowly, "sometimes people leave. Sometimes they don't want to be found." Margaret stared at him, at his calmness, at how his badge caught the light like it had nothing to answer for. She wanted to reach across the desk and shake the truth out of him. Instead, she gripped her purse tighter, her knuckles pale. "My sister loved that house," she said. "They just put in new wallpaper. My niece had school tomorrow. You think they walked away from that?" The sheriff sighed, flipping a page. No signs of struggle. No ransom. No witnesses. Could be a runaway case. Could be debt. "We'll keep the file open, but..." He trailed off, leaving the rest in silence. The kind of silence that meant you're on your own, outside the office. Reporters snapped photos of the Harper farmhouse, calling it the Sunday Vanish. For a week, it was front-page news. Then another story took its place. Within a month, the Harpers became another line in the town's rumor book. People whispered things over coffee at the diner. Maybe Thomas killed them all. Maybe Evelyn ran off with someone. Maybe they joined that commune out by the river. Every theory made Margaret's stomach twist, but she kept listening, because none of them felt true, and she couldn't stand that no one cared enough to find out. She spent her evenings at the kitchen table, surrounded by her sister's old letters, the ink now faint and soft. Evelyn's handwriting had always been neat, calm. "Thomas fixed the fence today," one letter said. "Lily baked her first pie." There was no sign of fear, no hint of running. Just life, ordinary, simple, gone. When Margaret went to the farmhouse, it already looked like a crime scene that time itself wanted to erase. The police tape hung loose in the wind. The kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon and dust. The sheriff had told her she could collect personal items for the record. She moved carefully through the rooms. Every creak of the floorboard felt like an echo trying to answer her. In Lily's room, a doll sat upright on the bed, its painted smile too bright against the quiet. Margaret reached out and touched the blanket, still tucked in at the corners. Her throat tightened. In the living room, she found Jacob's baseball glove beside a half-packed bag. The family dog's bowl was still full. Nothing about this house said departure. It said interruption. When she returned to the police station, her arms full of boxes, she asked again about progress. The deputy, a young man barely out of high school, avoided her eyes. "Sheriff says it's likely voluntary disappearance, ma'am," he muttered. "Not much else we can do." "Voluntary," she repeated, voice rising. "You think an 80-year-old volunteered to vanish?" The deputy didn't answer. The conversation ended the way all her questions did, quietly, with an apology that wasn't really an apology. The next week, Margaret tried the local newspaper. The editor, a man with yellow-stained fingers and a tired smile, told her the same thing. "People lose interest fast, Mrs. Cole. Best thing you can do is pray." She walked home that day under grey skies, her shoes catching puddles, her reflection breaking apart in every ripple. The whole town felt complicit in its silence. Windows shut when she passed. Doors clicked. The Harpers had become something to avoid. Like a bad dream, everyone had agreed not to remember. Late one night, unable to sleep, Margaret went through the small cardboard box she'd brought back from the farmhouse. Inside were Evelyn's recipe cards, a few photographs, and Jacob's notebook. As she flipped through, something slipped out, a small Polaroid, curled at the edges. It showed the family at the kitchen table. Thomas cutting the pie, Evelyn laughing, the children mid-bite. The photo must have been taken moments before they vanished. The sunlight through the window looked soft, safe. But in the far left corner, just barely visible through the curtain, a shape stood in the yard. A man, tall, still, watching through the glass. Margaret brought the photo closer to her lamp. The details were grainy, but the outline was clear enough. He wore a hat, broad-shouldered, his face lost in shadow. But there was something, a glint, near his chest. A badge. Her breath caught. The same kind of badge Sheriff Lenz wore every day. Margaret sat back, her pulse thudding in her ears. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel powerless. She felt cold, angry, awake. She looked at the wall clock. The hands pointed to 1:12. And outside, in the quiet street, a patrol car idled just a moment too long before driving away. The cassette clicked once before the whisper began. Already too late. Ellis Rowan froze. The voice was old, trembling, half buried under static, yet clear enough to feel close. Too close. He leaned toward his speakers, heart knocking. The tape had been silent for the first 2 minutes. Then, just before it ended, that sentence appeared, like someone speaking from the other side of 50 years. He paused the playback, staring at the label. Harper Estate Sale, Lot 12. He'd bought the recorder at a weekend yard sale in Bloomington, thinking it was just another vintage project for his restoration channel. He'd fixed hundreds of tapes before, sermons, interviews, forgotten love notes, but this one, it didn't feel like a recording. It felt like a warning. He rewound and played it again. The whisper came earlier this time, and then, faintly beneath it, laughter. A child's laugh, cut short. Ellis sat back, the air leaving his chest in a quiet exhale. He checked the date printed on the case, June 8th, 1975, the same day the Harper family disappeared from their farmhouse during lunch. By morning, he had read every article about the case he could find. The headlines were yellowed. The details brief: family vanishes from Indiana farm. No evidence of foul play. Case closed due to lack of leads. But there was one recurring name: Sheriff Lenz. Ellis wasn't a detective. He was an audio engineer who restored forgotten voices for a living. But something about this tape felt personal, as if someone had left it behind for him. His apartment turned into a small war room overnight. Newspaper clippings pinned to coffee cups stacked by the window. Old maps of Maple Hollow spread across the table. Every lead connected with red string police corruption. Missing evidence. A sheriff who retired early. He listened to the tape dozens of times, running it through filters, removing static layer by layer. What emerged wasn't comforting. After the whisper, "It's already too late," came a low sound. Not wind, not static. A heartbeat maybe, or footsteps. Then a man's voice, faint but clear. He knows. He always knew. Ellis's hands trembled. He leaned closer, and just before the tape ended, he heard something that froze him completely. A man speaking his name. Ellis ripped off his headphones and stared at the recorder. The name couldn't have been real. It was impossible. The Harper case was from 1975, nearly 20 years before he was born. Still, the voice had said it like a statement, not an accident. That night, he recorded his own note on his podcast microphone. His voice shook slightly. "Something's wrong with this tape. The more I clean it, the more it talks back. I'm not sure what I'm hearing anymore, but I need to know who made it." The next day, he found an address. Margaret Cole, the missing mother's sister, now 80, living in a nursing home 2 hours away. When he played the recording for her, her hands began to tremble on her lap. "I thought that thing was gone," she whispered. "They took everything from the house. Who took it?" Ellis asked gently. "The police said it was evidence, but when I asked for it back, they told me it never existed." Her eyes glistened. "That's my sister's kitchen. I can hear her voice underneath. Listen." Ellis adjusted the volume. Beneath the hum, a woman's faint laughter echoed, followed by the sound of a chair scraping. Then a thud. Then silence. Margaret pressed a tissue to her mouth. "That's the moment they were taken," she said. "I can feel it." He stayed with her for an hour, recording their talk. Her memories spilling out between breaths. Evelyn's love for music. Lily's habit of recording pretend interviews on that same cassette deck. Thomas arguing about land rights with the sheriff's cousin days before the disappearance. When he returned home, he sat staring at his corkboard. His reflection in the window looked hollow, almost transparent in the lamplight. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, a pull stronger than curiosity, guilt, the kind that comes from hearing someone's last words and realizing no one else ever bothered to listen. He searched police archives online. Most files were missing. Some reports had been accidentally destroyed, but a few lines remained, a reference to unprocessed evidence. Harper residence. Tape recorder, June 1975. That was the exact model sitting on Ellis's desk at 3 a.m. He played the tape one last time. The whisper sounded closer now, sharper. "It's already too late." But this time, right before the end, something new bled through the static. A faint hum, a child's giggle, and then a man's breath right against the mic. "Keep listening." Ellis stopped the reel. His own reflection in the darkened screen looked like someone watching him from the other side. He felt a chill crawl up his neck. The apartment's air was still, yet the recorder's reels started turning again slowly. On their own, he whispered to no one, "Okay, I'm listening." The reels spun faster, and deep inside the hiss, a door creaked open. Rain drummed softly against the rusted roof of the old police archive room as Detective Aaron Miles brushed dust from another box labeled Montgomery, 1975. He didn't want to be here. He didn't want to dig into a case that everyone, including his own department, wanted forgotten. But the more he read, the more the past whispered to him in voices that refused to die. For plates on the table. One chair pushed back, he murmured, flipping through the original reports. No fingerprints except the family's. No struggle. No exit traces. He sighed and leaned back, staring at the flickering bulb above. The entire Montgomery family had vanished mid-lunch, leaving their roast half-cut, drinks still sweating on the table. And for 55 years, no one had dared to reopen the file. Until now. Aaron wasn't doing this for headlines. He was doing it for the voice he'd heard last week, the trembling, broken whisper on a cassette tape mailed to his department. It wasn't an accident. They were taken. The voice had belonged to Martha Montgomery, the mother, who disappeared in 1975. That single line had cracked open decades of silence. He pressed play again. The tape hissed. Then that same weak voice returned. They came for us. Please. Don't let them erase us again. Aaron closed his eyes, the words digging under his skin. Who was they? He stood, grabbed his coat, and drove through the storm toward Montgomery Lane, a forgotten road now fenced off, where weeds had swallowed everything that once stood. The family home was just a skeleton, windows gone, roof caved in, but the front porch light fixture still dangled there, like a memory refusing to die. Inside, the air was stale, thick with mold and dust. Aaron clicked on his flashlight. The beam cut across peeling wallpaper, shattered frames, a child's toy soldier half buried in dirt. He crouched, brushing it clean, the name Ben etched underneath. The youngest Montgomery boy. As he rose, something creaked behind him. Hello? His voice echoed off the hollow walls. No reply, only rain seeping through broken shingles. Then he noticed it, a patch of newer wood beneath the dining table. The only thing in the entire house that looked replaced. He knelt and tapped it. Hollow, he pried it open inside. Wrapped in plastic lay several cassette tapes, the same kind as the one mailed to him. Dozens of them. He pulled one out and squinted at the handwritten label. June 17th, 1975. Recording hashtag for. His throat tightened. That was the exact date of the disappearance. Back at the station, he sat alone in the evidence room and inserted the tape into a dusty recorder. Static filled the air. Then, voice's mum, who's outside? A small boy asked. I don't know, sweetheart. Stay here, came Martha's shaky response. Footsteps, the clatter of a chair. Then a man's voice, calm but cold. You've been warned once, Mrs. Montgomery. This doesn't concern your family. Martha's voice trembled. You can't just please, don't hurt. A loud crash. Screams, then silence. Aaron froze, hand trembling on the stop button. His mind spun. Who was that man? And what did Martha mean by warned once? He rewound the tape, catching a faint sound buried under the chaos. A low humming, like machinery or broadcasting static. It didn't sound like anything domestic, more like a signal. He jotted it down. External transmission source. Government. Experiment. Then he stopped himself. This was dangerous territory. He leaned back, staring at the evidence board, now filling with red strings and faded photos. Each thread led somewhere, a neighbor's statement that never matched the timeline, a delivery truck that vanished from logs. A police captain who retired abruptly after the case closed. Aaron picked up the photo of Captain Howard, the lead investigator from 75. He was still alive, living quietly outside Montgomery County. The detective grabbed his car keys. If anyone knew the truth, it was Howard. When Aaron arrived at the old man's cabin, he found Howard sitting on the porch, blanket over his legs, eyes cloudy with memory. "I knew someone would come," Howard said before Aaron even introduced himself. "They always come after the tapes." "What tapes?" Aaron demanded. Howard's smile was tired, hollow. "The ones we buried. We were told to. We didn't understand what we'd found." Aaron's pulse quickened. "Who told you to bury it?" Howard's gaze drifted toward the woods, voice barely a whisper. "Not the police. Not the government either. Something older. Something that doesn't want the past remembered." Thunder cracked across the sky. The old man's hand trembled. "You shouldn't have played it, son," Howard warned. "Once you hear her voice, it finds you too." Aaron froze. "What finds me?" The old man turned, eyes wet with fear. The same silence that took them. And then, as lightning split the clouds, Aaron realized the woods behind the cabin were completely still. Not a single bird. Not a sound. Only silence. The same kind that began 55 years ago, when the Montgomery family vanished during lunch. The silence in the woods followed Aaron home. Even after he locked his apartment door and turned every light on, it lingered, heavy, watchful, alive. He placed the cassette tapes on his desk like fragile relics, then poured himself a coffee that went untouched. Sleep wasn't an option. Howard's last words echoed in his mind. "Once you hear her voice, it finds you too." He tried to laugh it off, but the unease wouldn't leave. Every time he replayed the tapes, small details emerged. Whispers under Martha's pleas, faint clicks like coded pulses, and the hum of something electrical by 3 a.m. He'd started connecting dots on his evidence board. The Montgomery case wasn't just a family disappearance. It was a cover-up. Someone had gone to extreme lengths to erase the truth. Forged signatures, missing reports, destroyed tapes. Yet one file kept reappearing in old references. File number 47B. Confidential internal communication. Montgomery incident. Aaron had never seen it. He grabbed his badge and headed for the archives again. The night guard looked up in confusion. "You back already, detective?" "Couldn't sleep," Aaron said flatly. The guard shrugged. "You won't find peace in that basement. Those boxes talk back." Aaron smirked but didn't respond. He descended the concrete steps, flashlight in hand, the sound of dripping water echoing through the cold corridor. He reached the restricted section, rows of locked cabinets, each tagged with a year. He ran his fingers along the faded numbers until one label caught his eye. 1975. Internal Affairs. The drawer was sealed with a red tag. "Do not open without clearance." He took a deep breath and broke it. Inside were 3 thin folders. One was labeled Witness Statements, another Incident Notes, and the third, barely legible under dust, for 7B. Aaron opened it carefully. The first page was a report typed in all caps. Subject: Unauthorized audio capture. Montgomery residence status. Containment required instruction. Cease public access immediately. Handler: R. Dorset, asterisk. Aaron frowned. R. Dorset. That name had appeared nowhere in the original police files. He flipped the page, Inside was a grainy photograph of two men in suits standing beside a van marked Signal Division. The same emblem appeared faintly in the corner. Not police, not federal, something else. And below the photo, someone had handwritten, "Test unsuccessful. Subject family exposed. Relocate evidence." He froze. Test? What test? Before he could process it, a low hum filled the air, deep and mechanical, coming from the far end of the room. The lights flickered once, twice, then silence again. Aaron turned slowly toward the noise, flashlight shaking slightly. The metal cabinet at the end of the aisle had moved, just enough to reveal a crack in the wall behind it. He approached cautiously, gripping the flashlight tighter. The panel was loose. He pulled it back. Behind it, he found a narrow compartment, and inside, a weathered Realtoral recorder still plugged into the wall, its red light faintly blinking. It was old, but running, recording. "Jesus," Aaron whispered. He pressed play, static. Then Martha's voice again, weak, terrified. "They said we'd forget, that no one would believe. But if you hear this, it means they failed." A second voice followed, mail.com, familiar. "You shouldn't be talking, Mrs. Montgomery." Aaron's chest tightened. He recognized it. "Captain Howard, no." Martha gasped. "You promised protection." A door slammed. The recording cut to silence. Aaron stepped back, pulse pounding. Howard had lied to him. He wasn't just an investigator. He'd been part of it. He rewound the tape, listening again, analyzing every background sound. A faint ticking clock, a dog barking, then a train horn. He froze. Howard's cabin wasn't near any tracks, but the original Montgomery home had been. That meant the recording hadn't been taken at the station. It had been taken inside the Montgomery house. Howard had been there that day. Aaron packed the file, grabbed the reel, and left in a hurry. He drove through the fog until the headlights cut through the shape of Howard's cabin ahead. But when he arrived, the door was already open. "Howard?" He called out. No answer. The old man sat slumped in his chair, eyes open but lifeless, the same blanket over his legs, untouched coffee on the table. The only thing new was a cassette tape placed beside him. Aaron picked it up. The label read, "For the one who listened." Hands trembling, he put it in his player. Howard's voice came through, frail but steady. "I didn't lie to you, Aaron. I was protecting you. The truth isn't buried in reports. It's under the house." Aaron's stomach dropped. "Under the house?" The tape hissed again, and Howard's last words faded into static. "They're still down there." Lightning flashed outside, throwing long shadows across the walls. Aaron looked up toward the dark window and swore he saw a faint movement in the glass. Someone or something was watching him from the woods, and this time, the silence outside didn't feel empty. It felt alive. The next morning, the fog clung low over the Montgomery property, swallowing the house in a pale gray haze. Aaron parked his car at the edge of the dirt road, engine still running, eyes fixed on the crooked silhouette of the old home. 50 years of dust and silence couldn't hide what it had seen. Howard's final words echoed in his mind. "They're still down there." He slipped on gloves, flashlight in hand, and pushed open the creaking front door. The air inside was damp, thick with the scent of mildew and rusted metal. Every footstep stirred up tiny storms of dust. The living room was just as it had been in the original police photos, plates on the table, glasses half full. A frozen snapshot of that lunch in 1975. He whispered to himself, "What did they do to you?" His beam of light swept across the cracked wallpaper until it caught something. A faint line along the floorboards beneath the dining table. Kneeling, he ran his fingers along it. There was a latch, a cellar door. He hesitated only a moment before pulling it open. The wood groaned like it hadn't moved in decades. A rush of cold air escaped from below, carrying the sharp scent of decay and iron. The flashlight flickered as he descended the steps. The sound of his boots against concrete echoed too loudly. At the bottom, he found a narrow corridor lined with metal panels and tangled wires. Old recording equipment, speakers, cables, switches, everything covered in dust but still intact. And there, in the center of the room, stood a metal chair bolted to the ground. Straps hung loose from its arms. A microphone dangled above it. Aaron's heart pounded. My God. The moment he stepped closer, a generator somewhere deep in the house hummed to life. Lights overhead flickered on, yellow, trembling, ancient dot. Then a voice crackled through the intercom. You should have stopped digging, Aaron. It was unmistakable, Captain Howard's voice. But he was dead. Aaron froze, scanning the walls. The sound wasn't live. It was a recording. A speaker somewhere hidden behind the pipes. The voice continued. You were never supposed to find this place. The project was buried for a reason. Those who remembered. They didn't survive long. Aaron clenched his jaw. What project? As if answering him, a reel-to-reel machine in the corner began to spin on its own. The tape hissed, then played a woman's voice, Martha Montgomery. They told us it was a research study. She whispered, voice trembling. They said it would help families communicate beyond words. But they made us listen to something. A frequency that wouldn't stop. Static broke her sentence. Then the sound returned. Faint screams in the background. Overlapping, distorted. Aaron covered his ears. But the noise grew louder, a low, rhythmic hum that vibrated through the floor, almost like a pulse. He stumbled back and yanked the power cord from the wall. The sound cut out instantly. The silence that followed was worse. Then footsteps echoed from above, slow, deliberate. Someone was in the house. Aaron turned off his flashlight, crouching near the stairwell. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped right above him. A voice called out, calm and measured. You should have left this alone. He recognized that voice too. Chief Daniels, his superior officer. Aaron's pulse spiked. You knew, he said quietly, standing, gun drawn. You knew this whole time. Daniels descended slowly, one hand on the railing, another raised as if in peace. I didn't know everything. I just made sure no one else did. You think the department wanted this story out? The Montgomerys were part of something bigger. Surveillance experiments, sound manipulation, government funding. If the public knew. You covered up torture, Aaron snapped. I covered up chaos, Daniels replied, voice tightening. And now you're about to ruin everything we've kept buried. Aaron took a step forward. They deserve justice. Daniels sighed, shaking his head. Justice died with them. Before Aaron could respond, Daniels drew his weapon. 2 shots rang out. One struck the wall near Aaron's shoulder, the other shattered a pipe. Steam filled the room in a violent hiss. Aaron dove behind the chair, returning fire. The bullet hit the generator, sending sparks across the floor. Smoke filled the basement, alarms screaming. Daniels stumbled, coughing, trying to find his footing. Aaron charged forward, tackling him to the ground. The two struggled, fists, shouts, metal scraping against concrete. Finally, Aaron wrestled the gun free and aimed it square at Daniel's chest. End of the line. Aaron growled. Daniel smirked through the blood on his lips. You think anyone will believe you? You're one man with a dead witness and a pile of ghost stories. Aaron's eyes flicked toward the table. The recorder light was still blinking. He lowered the gun, just slightly, and whispered, Maybe, but you just confessed to all of it. Daniels froze. Then his expression changed from defiance to horror. Sirens wailed faintly outside. Backup had arrived. Aaron stepped back, breath shaking, as officers stormed the house. Daniels was cuffed and dragged upstairs, shouting, You don't understand. It's not over. The sound's still active. You can't stop it. But his voice was drowned out by the chaos. Aaron stood alone in the flickering basement, staring at the old microphone swaying gently above the empty chair. For the first time, he realized what Martha had meant. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt, and in the hum of the broken generator, he swore he still heard her voice faint, pleading from somewhere far beyond the static. Please, turn it off. But there was nothing left to turn off. Only silence. And in that silence, truth finally screamed. 3 months later, the Montgomery house stood behind yellow tape and silence. The town avoided that road now, the one that ended in tall grass and questions no one wanted answered. Aaron sat alone on the hood of his car, watching the morning fog burn away in slow motion. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. The case was officially closed, at least on paper. Daniels had confessed, the tapes were in evidence, and the headlines called it the Montgomery cover-up. But the real story, the one no one dared to print, still lived somewhere between static and memory. Howard's cabin had been cleaned out. The basement was sealed. Every physical trace of the experiment was gone, except one. Aaron reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the final cassette, the one labeled for the one who listened. He hadn't turned it on since that night, but part of him couldn't let go. He slid it into the old recorder, pressed play, and waited. Static. Then Martha's voice, faint but steady. If someone hears this, it means they didn't win. Her tone wasn't afraid anymore. It was peaceful, almost resigned. They tried to erase us, she continued. But sound carries. It finds a way to survive. Aaron sat still, every word sinking deep. The wind moved through the trees like breath through an open wound. They said silence would protect them. Martha whispered, but silence keeps the truth alive. Then nothing. The tape ended. He exhaled slowly, eyes burning. A soft knock on his window pulled him back to the present. It was Mia, the young reporter who had covered every step of his investigation. She held a folder in her hands. New evidence? Aaron asked quietly. She shook her head. Closure. Inside were photos from the dig site. The cellar, the chair, the recorder, all catalogued, sealed, archived. They're finally demolishing the house, she said. Tomorrow morning. Aaron looked past her at the house, its broken windows reflecting a sky just starting to clear. Good, he said softly. It's seen enough. But as he turned back toward the road, a faint sound drifted through the open air, almost impossible to notice unless you were listening for it. A low hum, like a frequency buried beneath the wind. He froze. You hear that? Mia frowned. Hear what? The sound faded, replaced by birdsong. Maybe it was just his mind. Maybe it was something else. He gave a tired smile. Nothing, just echoes. She handed him a small recorder. "For your statement," she said. Aaron nodded, pressing record. His voice was steady but heavy. "For the record, the Montgomery case isn't about ghosts or experiments. It's about silence and what people do when they think silence can hide the truth." He paused, looking at the field where the house once stood. Sometimes truth doesn't bring peace. It just makes the silence honest. He stopped the recording and handed it back to her. "You can use that line if you want." Mia smiled faintly. "I think you just wrote your own ending." Erin stood, glancing one last time at the house as the first rays of sunlight broke through the mist. In the quiet distance, a child's laughter echoed faintly, thin, fleeting, impossible. Erin didn't turn around. He just whispered, "Rest now," and walked toward his car. As the engine started and the road stretched ahead, the camera lingered on the empty porch, sunlight cutting through broken glass, the last of the tape reels glinting in the grass like fallen memories. And for a brief second, before everything faded to white, the old recorder light blinked one final time. Then it went dark.